when that final number came in, I was waking up every Republican in this County. We're going to wake them up tomorrow. They're not expecting it. But more importantly, we're going to wake them up in 2020.
Buenas tardes y gracias por estar aquí con nosotros y con la próxima alcalde de Fort Worth, Deborah Peoples. Let's make sure we got some very important races to decide, including who will lead this community going forward. And I can attest from working with Deborah Peoples in Tarrant County, doing what people thought was going to be impossible. It had been 24 years since this county had gotten behind a Democrat. And so many people here, so many of our ambassadors, so many of our volunteers, so many of you who are willing to knock on doors and make phone calls. But Deborah Peoples, from day one, when no one knew who we were, invited us, told us we were going to win, and made it happen. And she's going to be on board. Put the hands to Deborah. Thank you. Thank you for doing this today. To Tara and our extraordinary volunteers who made this the most extraordinary experience that I've ever been a part of in my life. Getting to meet so many amazing people from so many parts of this state, finding hope in one another. For many of us at our lowest point, where we really needed to be lifted up, where we really needed to understand that together we can do something that otherwise, alone, apart, would be impossible. I got to join you in that effort, and it was the greatest thing that I've ever been able to do in my lifetime. And I'm grateful to you, the people of Fort Worth and Tarrant County, for leading the way every single step of the way. Thank you. Many of you I got to know in our many visits to this community, and in some ways feel like we're a part of a family. And so I want to be able to share some really important, very exciting, personal family news from the O'Rourke household. Sunday, while I was on the road in California, I got a call from Amy. And in the background, our 10-year-old daughter Molly was crying unconsolably. Her turtle, Gus, was missing. And as we did the forensic investigation into what had happened, and followed the trail of turtle food and the turtle's water bowl into the backyard where our dog Artemis also has all of our socks and shoes and underwear, everything else you can pick up, we were pretty sure that Gus had been eaten by the dog. And you know dogs, they just look guilty. So when we asked Artemis, she just looked like she had eaten the turtle. So this morning, as I was about to get on a plane to come see you, to land at DFW Airport, then picked up by Cynthia and Chris, Amy comes running into the kitchen. She has found Gus. Gus was in a closet, had been surviving in the dark of this closet, was covered in lint and hair, looked like he was 9,000 years old. He had all this stuff growing off of his face. And I took it to be a very good sign for this campaign, for our efforts, for my daughter Molly's happiness when she comes home from school a little bit later today, and for being able to believe and to have hope and to trust that things are going to work out. I can tell you, from having visited all 254 counties of Texas, now, in the first 5 weeks of this campaign, having held 115 town hall meetings across 14 different states, having answered 650 different questions, There are too many good people in this country who want to stand up for one another, for what is right, for the best traditions of the United States of America, for the outcome to be anything other than good. Now we just need to deliver and bring it home. And I'll tell you what, we and our fellow Texans have some experience and have a story to tell the rest of the country. A state that was written off as too red to compete, a state that ranked 50th in voter turnout in the United States of America, not because we do not love our democracy, but because some people, based on the color of their skin, their ethnicity, their country and national origin, were literally written out of a congressional district, of a reason to vote, of their very democracy. Too many people left behind, forgotten, written off, taken for granted. We were able to show what happens when we show up for one another. Though we did not win the race, we gained more votes than any other Democrat in the history of the state of Texas. You know how that happened? Though we did not win the race, we helped Colin Allred win his race and flip the House of Representatives, where they are now in the majority. Though we did not win our race, we helped Beverly Powell defeat Connie Burton and change the composition of our state legislature. And though we did not win our race, we helped 17 African American women in Harris County win their judicial races, changing the face of criminal justice in our largest community in this nation's most diverse city. And though we did not win the race, for the first time in 24 years, a Democrat won Tarrant County. And though we did not win that race, together we're going to make sure that Deborah Peoples wins her race tomorrow here in Fort Worth. And over the course of 2019, 2020, we're going to do everything within our power to defeat Donald Trump in November of 2020. And then we're going to bring this deeply divided, highly polarized, hyper-partisan country together, regardless of the differences in geography, in race, in religion, in sexual orientation, the number of generations that you can count yourself an American, or whether you just got here today. Before we are anything else, we are Americans first, and we're going to try to treat each other that way. When we were running together in Texas, one of the moments, one of the memories that will stay with me forever was the 254th county that we visited. Anybody from Cook County? From Gainesville? All right, I got one. I don't know if you were there or if you remember, it was about a year ago. It was at the start of the summer of 2018. We had an amazing meal downtown, and then a series of fried pies, which Gainesville is famous for. They were extraordinary. We then went over to the historic Santa Fe train station to give a speech and to listen to those I wanted to serve and represent before I asked for their vote. And as we're walking into the train station, someone stops me and they tell me it was at this train station that in World War II, an entire division of young men who had been training in Cook County, who had been training just outside of Gainesville, boarded trains that would take them to ships that would cross the Atlantic, take them to England. From there, boarding transports that would take them to Normandy. And on D-Day, all that training, all their service, and for too many, their sacrifice for this country, regardless of any differences before us, between us, amongst us, defining the greatness of this country once and for all. As we walked into that train station, this gentleman said, we do not know how many of them were Republicans, how many of them were Democrats, to whom they prayed, or to whom they gave their love. All that mattered was that they were Americans. And Beto, in this race, I want you to remember that as well. I also want you to know that Harry Truman, when he was running that unlikely race for president, where he was certainly going to lose against Dewey, the last stop of his whistle-stop tour in the state of Texas was at that Santa Fe station in Gainesville as well. And this is something that Harry Truman said that reflects the genius of those who boarded those transports, for so many to certain death, the genius of those Americans who are willing to take their lives into their hands and to lose their lives during the civil rights era of the freedom rides and the sit-ins and going into the Deep South and confronting entrenched power and racism so that men can be treated like men and women can be treated like women, not second-class citizens. Harry Truman, he reminded us that this country is not founded on fear. Instead, we are built on courage, on imagination, and an unstoppable determination to do the job at hand. That's us right now, right? That's what we're going to do. You name the challenge before us, they are the greatest of our lifetimes. Millions unable to see a doctor, and in the wealthiest, the most powerful planet in the universe that we know of, the most powerful country on the face of the planet. We're still exploring other worlds right now, but just take my word for it. You have people, including in the state of Texas, who are dying of diabetes, dying of the flu, dying of curable cancer, in a country that does not lack for resources or medicines or the technology to provide the cures, that only fails in the political will to bring the genius of this country to bear on the challenges that we face. Too many of you have shared with me that you have a family member with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or clinical depression who cannot get in to see a provider, far too often get arrested on purpose to go to the largest provider of mental health care services in the state of Texas, the county jail system in the state of Texas. Too many of you have shared with me, including Elisa Simmons in Arlington, that this state is at the epicenter of a maternal mortality crisis, 3 times as deadly for women of color, and in a state that has shut down a quarter of its family planning clinics. We made it hard not just to get legal access to an abortion, but to a cervical cancer screening, to see a family planning provider, or in a state that failed to expand Medicaid to see any kind of provider at all. And so, when we put our minds to it, we can ensure that we achieve universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care for every American, primary health care, the ability to afford their medications, mental health care for everyone, and healthcare also means that every woman makes her own decisions about her own body and has access to the care to ensure that she gets it. We can do that together. In a country where the economy is working really well for very few people and not at all for too many, school teachers and public school educators working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I want them to be able to focus on just one job. That child whose lifelong love of learning, once unlocked, there is no stopping her or stopping us as a country. So what if we decided we were going to pay our public school educators what they are worth so they just have one job? Nationally, we're going to ensure that we have paid family leave so that everybody can take time off to take care of themselves. That we have a minimum wage that is a living wage, $15 an hour, so nobody has to work 2 and 3 jobs. And what if, in a country where today in 2019, women are still paid 80 cents on the dollar that men make, women of color 61 cents for what men make, Latinas 53 cents for what men make. Not only will we ban discrimination in the workplace on any basis or difference. We will also ratify the Equal Rights Amendment so that no woman is treated differently in this country. In a country that has 2.3 human beings in cages, behind bars, locked up, the largest prison population on the face of the planet. For those prisoners, too many of their journeys began not in their 20s or 30s, not in high school, but in a kindergarten classroom, where a 4 or 5-year-old child of color is 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled as a white child. A history of segregation and Jim Crow and suppression that is alive and well in this country. Some people criminalized based on the color of their skin. A war on drugs that has become a war on people, and some people more than others. How in the world can we lock people up for possession of marijuana, a substance that is legal in more than half the states of this country? So working together, we will have meaningful criminal justice reform, not just ending the prohibition of marijuana, but expunging the arrest records of everyone in possession of marijuana. Freeing people to live to their full potential and understanding that the entrenched racism in this country is not just a function of our criminal justice system. It is in our healthcare system where we see disparities not just in maternal mortality. We recently learned that the infant mortality disparity between Black America and white America today is worse than it was in 1850, 15 years before the abolition of slavery, when there is 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in Black America, though the ancestors of Black Americans built the wealth of this country in the first place. And we have to look beyond a criminal justice system and look to the very foundation and roots of this country. Stare in the face the legacy of slavery, of suppression, of segregation going on in our communities right now. It is the only way that we will begin the work of repair and ensuring that we do not visit this injustice on every generation that follows. Do you want to do this together? We have an opportunity, once again, to take our rightful role on the world stage, to end a war now in its 18th year in Afghanistan with no definition of victory, no commonly understood strategy that has claimed the lives of thousands of Americans who've been forced to claim the lives of tens of thousands of people in the name of everyone in this country. A war in Iraq that is stretching into its 28th year through 6 successive presidential administrations. Only we are also in Syria and Somalia and Libya and Yemen, costing trillions of dollars, costing countless lives that are taken, that are sacrificed, that are given in the name of this country. Let us find a way to pursue our foreign policy, not on the backs of 18 and 19 and 20-year-old service members, but on diplomacy and a role that the United States can play in convening the powers of the planet together to meet otherwise intractable problems, to ensure that we meet the menace of a North Korea or an Iran without invading yet another country, that we pull the powers together to ensure that every one of us is doing our part before it is too late, as this planet continues to cook another degree or 2 degrees or 3 degrees Celsius. And how about this? Instead of building a 2,000-mile, 30-foot high, $30 billion wall, instead of meeting families when they have traveled 2,000 miles, much of it on foot, some of it atop a train known as La Bestia, or the Beast, with cages for the kids and deportation for the moms, what if we decided that we would do this? We would go to the countries of Central America, invest in their capacity to reduce violence there, help them meet those challenges that they're unable to meet themselves at a fraction of the cost of what we pay with laws or asylum seekers or anything else that we're doing today. And while I know this is hard for us to think about, with so many pressing concerns on our minds right now, but the genius of this country is that we are defined not by race, not by ethnicity as so many other nations are, but by this idea, our ideals, this experiment that all of us are created equal, that we are a land of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees from the world over who are able to freely choose their representatives, those who will serve them and who will be held accountable for their actions. It has worked, más o menos, for 243 years, but there is nothing that guarantees us another 243 or even another day unless all of us fight for it. We must decide that no man, no matter what position he holds, is above the law in this country. To invite a foreign power to participate in our elections, to obstruct justice and cover up during the investigation. There must be consequences, there must be accountability. We must get behind the House of Representatives if they pursue impeachment for this president. And failing that, we must make this decision in November of 2020. Whoever the nominee is, we get behind her or him and ensure that they win. Y por último, quiero hablar un poco sobre el cambio climático. We know that this planet has warmed 1 degree Celsius just since 1980 over pre-industrial revolution levels. Whether that means anything to you or to me, what is important to us is we know that our farmers in North Texas, in the Panhandle, in the West, who we charge with the responsibility of growing the food and the fiber that feeds and clothes not just the United States, but so much of the rest of the world, cannot persist much longer. At a town hall during the campaign, a young farmer, a Republican at that, came to one of our town halls to tell me that she is there missing her son's basketball game because what her grandparents planted and grew, what her parents planted and grew, she is planting and it is not growing anymore in this state. Those droughts, the historic fires that we saw in California, 58 inches of rain that fell from the sky in one storm, the landfall record in Houston, Texas, and it was the third 500-year flood in just the last 5 years. This devastation, this loss of life will become exponentially worse if we do not change course now, freeing ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, investing in renewable technology, making sure that at every level of government we reflect the cost of pollution so often borne by lower income and minority communities in this country. No more leasing on federal lands for oil and gas exploration. And a $5 trillion investment in the people of the future, the next generation, to make sure that this planet is habitable for them. We cannot meet this challenge or any other challenge that we enumerated tonight by half measures or by only half the country. This cannot be one candidate. It cannot be one party. It cannot be one type of community. This has to be all of us. The true genius of more than 320 million people brought to bear on the gravest challenges we've ever faced. This moment of maximum peril in our country's history could well become the moment of maximum promise for all of us if we are willing to see it through. Are you with me? Let us make sure that we go forth defining ourselves not by whom we are against or what we do not like or the way that we characterize and demean and degrade and bring down others in our lives or in this country. Not by our fears or our pettiness or our partisanship. Instead, let us forever be known by our ambitions, our aspirations, the work, the service, the sacrifice that we will employ to ensure that we fulfill them. And let's do this together. I am so glad to be running to serve you as President of the United States of America. I am forever grateful for giving me the chance to do this. Let's go. Gracias. 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 Thank you. Look, I gave you my thanks earlier for being there for us in 2017 and 2018, for turning Tarrant County blue, for being part of the most historic campaign, certainly in our lifetimes, maybe in the history of this state. But I'll tell you this from the outset of this campaign. I do not take any of that support for granted going forward. I fully expect to have to earn it. We've got 20, count them 20 other people running for the Democratic nomination. So I want to make sure that I have a chance to listen to you tonight, to answer your questions, to hear what's on your mind. Cynthia Cano, in the matching Fort Worth hat and green shirt, has got a microphone. If you can get her attention, she will bring it to you.
Here's our first question, right here, and you gotta say your name and then yell really loud.
Don't worry, I will. Hey, Fort Worth, are you as excited as I am to be the president? First you stole my thunder, I wanted to tell you how proud I was of you for turning Fort Worth and Tarrant County blue. It was a big deal. So I have a three-part question, and I want you to talk a little bit more about your commitment to transparency. Those of us in Texas are a little bit spoiled. We know that you're probably one of the only representatives that did 2 town halls a month and rode the bus to talk to your constituents. But I know you said that you would ask your the people who had your cabinets to have town halls. I want to go one further. Our press secretary has not had a White House press briefing in almost 60 days. I would like to ask that you will make sure that we have White House press briefings, and that if you catch that person lying, that you will fire them. Number 2, I want you to go one step further. We spent $700 million in the budget for the Defense Department last year. Our Pentagon has not had a press briefing in 300 days. I want your cabinet officials to be held accountable. I want press briefings daily. I want my country back, and I know you can do it. And my last question, and this is really important, Beto, if Saturday Night Live does a funny skit, will you promise not to hate tweet the country on Sunday morning?
It's really good. Look, real quick. I served on the El Paso City Council for 6 years. Every single week, we held a town hall meeting to listen to those that I served and represented, to remind myself to whom I'm accountable. And it made me a much better representative than I would have been otherwise. Really feel like I was able to deliver to those whom I served. When I was in Congress, every single month we held town halls. And you could come to them if you wanted to. You could come to them if you loved me. My mom often did. You could come to me if you were upset about something that I had done, had a question, an idea that you wanted to see become a bill, which you would like to see signed into a law. And we had some examples of that. How did we expand mental health care access for veterans in this country at a time that nearly 20 of them a day were killing themselves? We worked with Republicans, forced to if we did not choose to by my constituents at meetings like these, who wanted to make sure that regardless of the politics, damn the politics, we find the way to get to the solutions that we need. So every cabinet secretary in our administration We'll be holding these town hall meetings, not hand-picked audiences. Anybody can come in, ask any question, make sure that they get the answers. Yes, if our press secretary lies to the American people, that person will no longer be our press secretary going forward. And look, in whatever form the coverage comes, from journalists, from Saturday Night Live, from those who make fun or mock what we're doing, we live in the world's greatest democracy. The press are not the enemy of the people. They are the best defense against tyranny. We welcome them. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, here we go, over here.
Yes, no, don't run up here.
Hi, Beto. I just want to say that I support you so much in Senate election, and I voted for you in primaries and Senate. I'm so excited to vote for you 2 more times in primaries and general election. And then I have possibly a 2-part question, if that's okay. First off, so we've got reform, so many people focus on AR-15s, which is so important with mass shootings, but not enough people talk about suicide by gun. What can you do for waiting periods and to decrease suicide by guns? And then also regarding education, there's so many obstacles regarding community college to four-year college. What would you do as president to help alleviate those obstacles? And thank you again for running them.
Thank you for being here. You asked a really good question. So, we know in those states that have adopted them, thanks to Moms Demand Action who are here with us today, and the young people who led the marches for our lives, and everyone who's standing up for sensible gun policy. We know that in those states that adopted universal background checks, a near 50% reduction in gun violence. We also know that weapons like the AR-15, derivative of weapons that were designed, engineered, sold to the United States military for the express purpose of killing people as effectively, as efficiently, and as great a number as possible, are really good at doing that and should belong on the battlefield, but not here in our communities. But you asked a really important question. Of the more than 30,000 people who will lose their lives to gun violence in this country, no other country comes anywhere close to these kinds of numbers. Many of them will die by their own hand. And so what do we do about this? When we visited with those students who had survived the slaughter at Santa Fe High School, they came to the table with a number of very reasonable proposals, including universal background checks, including stopping the sales of weapons of war, but including red flag laws. If someone poses a danger to someone in my life, your life, in their life, if someone poses a danger to themselves, there should be a sober, deliberate, due process through which they can pass to make sure that at least temporarily we stop them from being a harm to themselves or anybody else. I understand that the NRA and that the gun lobby might be against this, might think that this is trying to infringe on our Second Amendment rights, but it is not, because we also have a right to our lives and the lives of the loved ones in our lives, and let's stand up for them where we can. Thank you. All right, Libby. So first of all, do not try to vote, okay? Got to keep this clean. Libby, there are so many great Texans your age, even younger, who with their parents, with their neighbors, with their friends, were knocking on doors, were making phone calls for us, we're sending out postcards that they designed by hand and sending them out to other people. That human-to-human contact in this very digital moment, in this very divided country, is so powerful. So if you're willing, with your folks or with an adult in your life, to go knock on doors for us and talk to people, I guarantee you it'll make a difference and it might help us win. You ready to do that?
And then I just wanted to thank, we have Megan here, making her way through so we have a staff working here. Thank you so much. All right, here we go.
Tip generously, everybody.
My name is Edward Mays, and I'm from Connecticut, and I now live here in Georgia.
the first person that I voted for here in the state of Texas. I am one of these demographics. I'm a black African American woman, obviously. And there's some of these demographics, so you have to go through us to get to the presidency, right? So I have, I guess my question is this. I have recently had a condition, breast cancer. Thank God I made it through. Thank you. What is your thoughts on healthcare for all, for one? I have an autistic child who has Asperger's, and it's crazy trying to get help in anything. Because here in the state of Texas, you have to have a psychiatrist, whereas other places you need to have maybe a counselor or something. Getting care for any child who has an educational issue or has a problem with autism, it's awful. What can you do as our next president to help women and parents like myself with pre-existing conditions and also with children with special issues?
Yeah. Thank you for being here, and thank you for voting for us in the past. Quickly on healthcare. So the goal has to be universal, that's everybody. Guaranteed, which means what we have learned is that there are some people who have insurance, but they do not have guaranteed care. So we learned about a school teacher who died in Weatherford, Texas 2 years ago. She had insurance, she was covered, quote unquote, but she didn't have $119 in her checking account, and that was the cost of the copay for her flu medication, and she died of the flu. So it's got to be guaranteed. Price cannot be the barrier to you being able to save your own life or provide for the lives in your family. And it has to be high quality. We cannot create different classes of care for different classes of America. Now the solution to this requires an investment that will be measured in the trillions of dollars. If we're going to get to universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care, guaranteeing everybody, tens of millions of our fellow Americans who have no care right now can enroll in Medicare. Those who have insignificant or too expensive insurance can choose to move over to Medicare. Those who have employer-sponsored plans that they like, that work for them and their families are able to do that, it's going to be expensive. But it's a lot less expensive than what we are paying for today in our county jails, in our emergency rooms, in lives that are lived far shorter than they should be otherwise, or diminish their ability to contribute to our greater potential. So I want to get there as fast and as sure as we can, and I want to make that case to the American people. On this second issue, my sister Erin, significant intellectual disabilities, and we learned firsthand how our public schools in Texas are not funded sufficiently, that those world-class heroes who are instructing those kids in those classrooms, who do not have the pay, the support, the investment that they need to be able to reach every one of those kids in the way that they want to, and a federal government, through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, is paying a fraction of the true cost of care and instruction in those classrooms. At the state level and at the federal level, we need to step up, and we do so know that those in whom we invest will lead much better, much stronger lives, will be able to contribute far more over the course of their lifetimes and cost less to their families, freeing them to be able to do whatever they were put on this planet to do in the first place. So I want to make an investment in mental health care and IDEA, in supporting students with special needs and the teachers who teach them. Again, not inexpensive, but well worth the investment. Thank you.
Okay, go in the middle, go right down the middle. Here we go. And I know there's a lot of hands up. I promise I will get to as many as I can, but unfortunately I won't get to everybody. I'm sorry about that. Thanks for your patience.
I got a point question.
Hey Beto, my name is Andrew Gonzalez. I graduated from Texas A&M 2017. As an engineer, I'm part of the 800,000 people for DACA. And my question to you is, since it's been in the backlog because of the Donald Trump administration, and I just want to know where you stand right now as far as comprehension immigration for this country. Since Texas and California has the most applicants for DACA program, and I just want to know what plan you have for all of us. And yeah.
Thank you for being here and asking such a great question. So this is one of these issues where I hope my grandkids are reading about us in the future, the people of 2019. And they will not be able to believe that there are more than 1 million dreamers in this country who in every meaningful way were just as American as they are, or as anybody here is, who were brought here at a young age and who have contributed far more to this country than they've ever received in any benefit or any way measurable, who are not only being taught in our classrooms and defended on the front lines in these wars that we are fighting, they are so often the teachers in the classrooms and those service members on the front lines of those wars that we are fighting, willing to serve and sacrifice and contribute, and they are. So the solution can be nothing short of permanently freeing them from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in this country, their true home country. By any way you measure it, the benefit is not to the dreamers only, it is to this country in the billions of dollars in growth and job creation and things that we can't even measure. The families that are raised, the poems that are written, the things that you're going to engineer going forward for our great state. But what I've heard from almost every dreamer that I've listened to is that their freedom from that fear, their U.S. citizenship cannot be purchased at the price of their parents, the original dreamers. They too must be brought out of the shadows and given the chance to fully contribute here. And then we have the opportunity to rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, understanding that not just the economic success and strength of our communities, but take it from a Paseño, El Paso, one of the safest cities in the United States of America, a city of dreamers and immigrants and asylum seekers. Our safety and security depends on their ability to find a home here, to do everything that they were intended to do in their lives, and to do it right here in the United States of America. Thank you for asking the question, and thank you for being here. Yes, Ms. Connie.
I have time for 3 more.
And Kano, I've got one up front, okay? If you can add that to your total.
Okay. Hi, my name is Minha. I'm a high school sophomore right now, and my 18th birthday is 5 months after the 2020 election, so I'm really sad I can't vote for you. But I wanted to ask you about voter suppression, because while you were running your race in Texas, there were so many races across this country that inspired me, and one of them was Stacey Abrams, who won Georgia. And the reason Stacey Abrams could not win her seat was purely based on gerrymandering and the fact that the man that she was running against was in charge of elections in the state of Georgia, and he made sure that the people who supported her, that low-income people and African Americans, could not go out and vote for her. So if you are elected president, what will you do to make sure that never happens again?
Excellent. Amazing. So, you will never believe who I was talking to on the way here tonight. Stacey Abrams is in the state of Texas. She just gave the keynote address at the Annie's List lunch in another part of the state. I called her to thank her for all of the work that she's doing on voting rights and making sure that every person in this country can vote and that every vote counts in this country. We talked about how in our states of the former Confederacy, really ever since the end of Reconstruction, we have drawn people out of their ability to participate in this democracy. In Texas, beginning in the 1920s, in the Democratic primary, if you were African American, you by law could not vote. There was a doctor in El Paso, Texas, Lawrence Nixon, who also founded the first branch of the NAACP in the state of Texas, and it was in El Paso, who took his case to the Supreme Court not once, but twice, did not resolve it within the first year or the first 10 years, tried to vote for the first time in 1924, had to come back and finally vote in 1944, almost 20 years to the day, in the same polling location, fire station number 5 in downtown El Paso. You would think, after his victory before the Supreme Court, opening up the franchise to his fellow Texans, we would be number 1 in the country in voter turnout. But we were 50th because the gerrymandering based on race and ethnicity, voter ID laws that say that you can use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the ballot box, but you cannot use your student ID at Paul Quinn College to prove who you are at the ballot box, have kept people out of our democracy and kept their genius out of our government. So we need a new Voting Rights Act in this country to make sure that most states can accept itself. We need automatic voter registration so that when you turn 18 years old, you are ready to go. We need same-day voter registration in this country. We need to end the practice of members of Congress choosing their voters. No more gerrymandering in the United States. And as President of the United States, if she's willing to do it, we will put Stacey Abrams in charge of this effort so that we get it done. Thank you for the question.
Same place. Hi, my name is Sandy. I'm a 70-year-old retired nurse. And what I'm asking about is, I think we've lost a lot of the Christian voters to the Republicans just because they're anti-abortion. Now, I have always been pro-choice for women and hope they make the right choice. But are you against the full-term abortion?
This is the best way I can put it in an answer to your very thoughtful question. I trust a woman to make the best decisions for herself, for her husband, for her family. And I want to make sure that that continues to be the law of the land going forward. It has been since 1973. But the next president will decide, the next nominees to the Supreme Court will decide this issue, who counts as a citizen, whether you can, as we still do in Texas, discriminate based on sexual orientation or differences that do not matter. So this next president and these next appointments will decide these issues. And look, let's be for life at every single stage. No more putting kids in cages. No more underfunding the foster care system in this state. No more having 30,000 kids in CPS custody underfunded and insane in Texas by law. You can be too gay to adopt one of those kids. Let's end discrimination so that everybody can live to their full potential. Thank you.
Hi, Beto. My name is Uduak Makenga, and I go to UNT. I'm a college student. By the grace of God, I'll be graduating college a year and a half early. We'll be attending law school fall 2020, future civil rights attorney. And so I say that because 70% of college, well, this is actually 2 questions in a way, sorry. 70% of college students graduate with a significant amount of loans. Over 44 million Americans collectively hold nearly $1.5 trillion in student debt loans. That means roughly about 1 to 4 adult Americans are paying off their student loans. And so with that being said, what are your plans as far as us as students? We're on this 4-year plan trying to get a job like afterwards, we're on this 4-year plan. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. We're coming out of college trying to get a job, like a high-paying enough job to pay off these loans. So what are your plans to help the student loans? And also, this one's not really a question, it's kind of like a comment. Last summer, I was blessed with a summer internship, so this summer I'm still looking for one. I gave my resume to your
And Cynthia, after this, I have one more up here, and then we'll come back to you. So, first of all, great questions. The answer to the second one is yes, the internship is yours. You got your own. Thank you for doing it. So, look, I am so fortunate that tomorrow I'm going to be part of the commencement ceremony at the graduation of the seniors of Paul Quinn College. Here's one of these institutions of higher learning that has begun to figure out the answer to your question. Those graduating seniors will not graduate with a crushing student loan burden on their backs. It totals $1.5 trillion, as you said, for the entire United States. And the average senior nationally is graduating with $40,000 on their back average. Some hundreds of thousands of dollars more, some less, but not at Paul Quinn College, because they're innovating in ways that students can earn that degree without taking on that debt. If we invest in historically black colleges and universities to provide so much value, we're going to get such a great return, far and away above the cost of the initial investment. If we ensure that community college is free for every American who wishes to attend one, we will stop digging a hole in this country. Public serving, publicly funded, public-facing 4-year degree programs. You should not take on debt if you choose to go to one of those universities as well. I want to make sure that if at 18 years old you graduate college ready, that you're truly ready financially to be able to attend one of those universities. Yes, it's an investment from all of us, but it's an investment that pays dividends well above the original cost that we put in. It's the way we look at education in general in this country. Nothing should be different for higher ed. And then, if you are one of those Americans who has part of that $1.5 trillion in debt, I want to reduce the burden that you carry right now. If you're willing to commit some part of your life to public service, if you're willing to teach or serve in one of our great public schools, if you're willing to serve one of our veterans in a VA that is 45,000 critical positions short, if you're willing to go to an underserved community and work an in-demand job and return vitality and life to your hometown, I want to wipe that debt clean at a minimum. At a minimum. Let's refinance outstanding debt at far lower rates. We have a 10% default rate right now. That is not good for anyone. So stop digging the hole, number one, and number two, relieve the burden for those who are carrying it right now. Thank you for asking the question. Cynthia, one more right here.
Hi, Congressman, and I wish I could say Senator O'Rourke. First off, congrats to Gus, welcome home. There's so many topics I would like to ask about, from family separation at the border to walls interfering with butterfly migration at the border. Most importantly, I have been on Medicare disability for 15 years. I've acquired over $2 million in medical bills during that time. And thank God, because of Medicare disability and Social Security disability, my wife and my 2 grown children now have not missed a meal. But I fear, my wife and I are 61, our children now are in their 30s. I fear that if a medical problem of one of them came around where they incurred $1 million or $2 million or who knows how many dollars, how could a universal health care, Medicare for all, be paid? And I thought I was going to cry, but I'm pretty proud of myself. I'm a CPA, I have lots of ideas, but I'll leave it to you and your hopefully Democratic Congress and Senate.
Great question. So we want to ensure the viability of Medicare as we expand its coverage to tens of millions more of our fellow Americans. We want to ensure that other programs and compacts that we have with one another, like Social Security, still work, where we know that by the mid-2030s, along current trajectory, it will pay some fraction of what it owes to those working Americans who have paid into it every day. How do we guarantee the long-term survival, viability, and strength? We want to improve these programs, not diminish them going forward. Well, with the latter, with Social Security right now, as you all probably know, Americans only pay into the Social Security Trust Fund on the first $129,000 that they make. Every dollar, every $1 million, every $1 billion over that is not taxed the same way it is for every other working American. If we lift that arbitrary cap, we ensure the viability of Social Security into the next century and beyond for Medicare. An expansion that will cost us trillions of dollars. How are we going to pay for that? You also have to ask yourself, how are we paying for care in our county jails right now? Somebody who gets locked up for their schizophrenia in the Harris County Jail, that facility is the largest long-term mental health care facility in the state of Texas right now. It costs the taxpayer in this state $110 a day to feed somebody, to clothe them, to keep a roof over their head, and prescribe the psychotropic medications that momentarily make life bearable for them. For a fraction of that cost, if we directed it efficiently, economically, we could provide contiguous, long-term, outpatient care to that same person without ever having to lock them up. So we're going to direct that money in a different place and spend a lot less of it then. If we look at the $2 trillion in tax cuts that were passed and signed into law just last year, and make sure that a corporate tax rate that went from 35 to 21% moves up a little, doesn't have to go all the way, but into the mid-20s, hundreds of billions of dollars are generated over the next 10 years. If we tax capital at the same rate that we tax ordinary income, for some reason in this country, we give you a write-off and a discount if you earn your money through investments, but we do not if you work at McDonald's, if you work at Starbucks, if you work a job like most Americans in this country. Tax income at the same rate regardless of where it comes from. You generate hundreds of billions of dollars through that as well. And then lastly, if you look at how we got to $22 trillion in debt, it is both these tax cuts under this administration and under George W. Bush, but it's also these wars that we've been fighting without end that have racked up trillions of dollars. If we bring those wars to a close and pay that dividend into people and communities, this country is going to be so much stronger forward. Thank you.
Okay, I have my last three here, and we only have time for this last three.
Hi, Beto. You might not remember me, but we're high school buddies from El Paso, Ohio.
Hey, how are you? Hi.
I have a couple of questions. I'm an educator with Eagle Mountain Zion ISD, and you say we're getting a raise. But is our insurance going to get higher too? Because we get a raise, but then our insurance and property taxes go up too. So we go home with nothing. What is your plan for that?
You're absolutely right. So when we capped teacher and public school educator pay in this state, when we haven't paid a cost of living adjustments through the teacher retirement system in the state of Texas before last year for like 15 years, we also at the same time doubled the cost of health care for retired teachers on a fixed income that has not risen in more than a decade. We're pricing people out of their homes and into second and third jobs when they're in their 70s in this state despite a lifetime of service. So you're absolutely correct. Public school educator pay alone will not be sufficient. It also means guaranteed care, and I mentioned that teacher in Weatherford who lost her life to the flu as an example of what happens when we do not do that. And it means investing in the long-term retirement and the teacher's retirement system of Texas going forward, so every teacher can retire to a life of dignity instead of a life of poverty going forward. So yes, we've got to make all those investments going forward. You've invested your life in us, we've got to invest in you. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. I'm Kendra Wallace, and I'm very interested in your climate plan. I appreciate that you have put out this for us.
Thank you.
My question is about the Carbon Dividend Act. How do you feel about the Carbon Dividend Act?
Yeah, so brief summary really quickly. Day one, the next president needs to not just sign us back up to Paris, we're the one country that has exempted itself. We have to vigorously enforce the agreement in Kigali, which says that hydrofluorocarbons, which are many times worse for the atmosphere and greenhouse effect than carbon dioxide, we've got to get those to zero as soon as humanly possible. I mentioned leasing on federal lands and federal waterways and making sure that existing leases reflect the cost of carbon and pollution. That's worked in as well. But also every single procurement decision going forward for the federal government, the fleet of cars and trucks that we drive, the cement and steel that we purchase or find other building materials where we can. In every single act and decision, we look at the contribution to this planet, to our atmosphere, and to our climate. All of that can happen on day one. I mentioned a $5 trillion investment in ensuring that we meet the challenges of a changing climate. By 2050, net zero greenhouse gas emissions, halfway there by 2030. And then your question in part asks, what about those communities that have borne the brunt of climate change so far? We're in the Central Valley of California. It also grows a lot of this country and this world's food. They have some of the worst water quality, some of the worst air quality anywhere in this country. About half of America today lives in communities where the air is not safe to breathe. Water systems, somebody asked about Flint, Michigan, the Central Valley, Denmark, South Carolina, where it's going to cost $15 million for them to be able to drink their water. 50 water systems in the state of Texas, not safe to drink the water, whether it is Flint or any other part of this country. Every single child should be able to depend on the air they breathe and the water that they drink. So the dividends must be paid back to the communities that have borne the brunt of climate change and pollution so far. Absolutely, and thank you for asking.
Thank you, my friends, right here. So this, we're going to go here, and then this will be our very last question.
What about Chris's birthday? I got it. I got the microphone. Hi, Beto. My name's Ellie, and I'm with the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Tarrant County. We're known as NAMI. And I know we're already on the same page on mental health issues, but the question I want to ask affects all of us as citizens, and that is, what is your vision for the future and quality and culture of policing across our nation?
It's a great question, and let me begin my answer by just sharing how grateful I am for those women and men who are willing to serve as police officers and sheriff's deputies in law enforcement roles throughout this country. Incredibly challenging, very tough, very often underpaid and under-resourced as well, and true public service. And it's been hard for me to meet a single one of them who does not want to do a better job, who does not want to be held to a high standard, who does not expect some level of accountability given the position that they're in. And I really respect them even more for that. But we cannot have impunity in this country for those few bad actors who operate outside of the law, especially when they have taken the lives of those they have been sworn to serve and to protect. For both of John to be killed in his own apartment, unarmed, and then for information to be leaked that he had some trace amount of marijuana, as though that would justify the killing of an American in this country, is wrong. And so there has to be absolute transparency and accountability. The federal government has a role to play on a number of different levels. We help to fund these local police departments and sheriff's departments. That funding should be tied to full reporting on use of force, against whom that force is used, and justice coming through whenever that force is used against somebody who is unarmed and poses no threat to that officer or that community. I want to make sure that we do that, not just so that we get justice for those who have been harmed, who have been killed. That is paramount. But I also want to make sure that every single one of us can trust and believe in the vast majority of police officers and sheriff's deputies who do a great job and put their lives on the line every day for this country. And then lastly, this administration has declined to use the power of the federal government to pursue civil rights investigations, prosecutions, and justice and accountability. I want to make sure that that is brought to bear whenever, for whatever reason, a local municipality or county or state is unwilling to do that work itself. So thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
So, I have a question. All right, wait, hold on a second. It's kind of similar to what somebody's already asked, but, you know, I'm worried about my boyfriend. He's black, and I worry that my friends who are black, and they all worry about their safety, but I also worry about my community of deaf people, hard of hearing people. You know, if a cop comes up to us or stops us or something, and they scream something at us, they say stop or stop the car, whatever, and I don't hear them, or, you know, I can't hear them. So, you know, black people have an issue with the police, there's abuse, they might get killed, but that's also an issue for many people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Yes, it is. Or have other disabilities. I remember a few years ago, there was a man who got abused. He was thrown down onto the floor just because he couldn't hear what the police were saying. And he had a paper that said, I am deaf, I can't hear. But, you know, he didn't have any time to say, you know, hold on, excuse me, I'm deaf. What should you do in that situation? And, you know, how are you going to protect us?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for being here. I want to make sure that, especially when we're talking about law enforcement, we discuss it within the larger context that we began this conversation with. Yeah. Is this better? Yes, thank you. So I talked about a country that has set some people apart and some people down from its very foundation. And unfortunately, through our criminal justice system, we see a reflection of a larger structural problem that we've had from the very beginning. And so when I talked about facing the legacy of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and suppression, we have to do all of that or we will get none of this right. By that same token, when you have a president who invites the kind of hatred and racism that we've seen, who calls Klansmen very fine people, who says that Mexican immigrants are rapists and criminals, who wants to ban all Muslims from the shores of this country, there are real consequences to that. We've seen hate crimes in this country up every one of the last 3 years. On the day that he signed his executive order banning Muslim travel or seeking to ban Muslim travel, the mosque in Victoria, Texas was burned to the ground in our state. You don't get kids in cages until you have a president who describes them as an infestation first. He's also made fun of and tried to set apart and demean people with disabilities. He did it as a candidate. He set the tone, or he's tried to, in this country. But I want to say that these conditions preceded him as well. Democrats and Republicans alike have been unwilling to embrace those with differences and who are living with disabilities, have very often sought to institutionalize them instead of giving them their independence and making sure that they're full-fledged members of civic life. So it is upon all of us not just to tolerate, not just to respect, but to embrace our differences and lift every single one of us up. That is how we're going to be able to do this. Thank you for asking the question. Thank you very much. Thank you for interpreting for us. One last favor I want to ask. Chris Evans, where are you? Chris, come forward real quick. You all know Chris. He and Cynthia traveled in the van across the 254 counties of Texas with us. He's on board for this journey as well. And today is his birthday. I was hoping that you join me in singing happy birthday to Chris Evans, all right? 2, 3, 4.
Happy birthday